Ma'am, hey, I need you to stop right there. Where do you think you're going dressed like that?
I'm going to my aircraft, officer. I have 211 passengers boarding in 18 minutes.
Your aircraft, sure. I'm gonna need you to come with me until we verify that.
Then I suggest you verify it quickly. Because if that plane doesn't push back on time, every single person in this airport will...
At exactly 6:47 in the morning, inside Meridian International Airport in Charlotte, North Carolina, a woman in a full commercial airline captain's uniform walked calmly through the terminal toward her gate. 4 gold stripes sat on her shoulders. Her airline's insignia was pinned to her chest. Her crew credential hung visibly around her neck. Her flight bag rolled behind her. She had done this exact walk hundreds of times before. She knew every corridor, every turn, every gate number by heart. This was her airport. This was her morning. This was her aircraft waiting at gate C-14, and she had 201 passengers counting on her to get them to Chicago safely. Her name was Captain Denise Hargrove. She was 45 years old. She was one of the most experienced commercial pilots in the entire Trans-American Airways system. And in less than 3 minutes, she would be stopped, questioned, grabbed by the arm, and detained by an airport police officer who looked at everything she had built over 22 years. Every hour in the air, every certificate on her wall, every life she had kept safe at 38,000 feet, and decided it wasn't possible. Decided it couldn't be real. Decided that the woman standing in front of him in full captain's uniform with every valid credential visible simply did not belong there. That stop lasted 31 minutes. 31 minutes that delayed flight TA-447 and left 201 passengers sitting at the gate wondering what was happening. 31 minutes captured on 3 airport security cameras, 1 passenger's phone pressed against the terminal glass, and the officer's own body camera. 31 minutes that would be watched by more than 47 million people around the world. And 31 minutes that would end a career, but not hers. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. This story builds into something powerful, and you do not want to miss a single minute of it. Now let's talk about who Denise Hargrove really was, because you need to understand exactly what this officer was looking at when he decided to stop her. Denise grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, the youngest of 3 children. Her father was a bus driver. Her mother was a registered nurse. Neither of them had ever been on a plane until Denise was 12 years old and her school arranged a field trip to a small regional airfield outside the city. While the other kids were looking at the snack table, Denise was pressed against the chain link fence watching a Cessna make its approach. Something clicked in her that day that never unclicked. By the time she was 16, she had read every aviation book her local library carried. By 19, she had earned her private pilot's license, becoming one of fewer than 400 black women in American history to have done so at that age. She put herself through Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University on a combination of scholarships, part-time work, and sheer refusal to quit, graduating with honors with a degree in aeronautical science. She then spent 4 years building flight hours as a regional carrier first officer before Trans-American Airways recruited her at 28. She made captain at 34. She was one of the youngest captains in the airline's history at the time. By the morning of this incident, Denise Hargrove had logged over 17,000 flight hours. She was type-rated on 3 aircraft: the Embraer 175, the Boeing 737, and the Airbus A320. She had flown across the Atlantic. She had landed in near-zero visibility. She had handled an engine anomaly over the Gulf of Mexico with a full cabin of passengers and brought everyone home without a scratch. Her record at Trans-American was spotless. Her crew evaluations consistently used words like unflappable, commanding, and exceptional. She had been named to the airline's internal safety review panel twice. She was not a new face. She was not a trainee. She was not someone trying to sneak onto an aircraft. She was the captain, the person legally and professionally responsible for every soul on that plane. She was also a mentor. For the last 8 years, Denise had volunteered with a nonprofit aviation program dedicated to introducing young black girls to careers in flight. She had personally mentored 14 young women who went on to earn their wings. She gave her personal number to girls who called her at 10 o'clock at night with questions about flight school applications. She showed up to career fairs in her uniform not because the airline asked her to, but because she remembered being 12 years old at that fence, and she wanted every little girl who felt that same pull to know that the cockpit was available to them. That was the woman Officer Brad Kowalski stopped in the corridor of Meridian International Airport on a Tuesday morning in March. Now let's talk about Brad Kowalski, because this story requires us to understand him too. Kowalski was 34 years old, a 7-year veteran of the Meridian Airport Police Division. Before the airport, he had done 2 years in mall security. He stood 6'2", carried himself with the particular confidence of someone who had never been seriously challenged in his professional life. In 7 years at that airport, he had developed a routine. He knew the terminal. He knew the faces that belonged there and the faces that, in his estimation, did not. He had stopped people before, dozens of them, and it had always resolved itself quickly and quietly. Nobody ever pushed back. Nobody ever called his supervisors. Nobody ever made it a thing. He had no reason to believe this morning would be any different. He was about to be wrong in a way that would follow him for the rest of his life. On the morning of the incident, Denise arrived at the airport at 6:15 a.m., a full 90 minutes before her scheduled departure. This was her habit. She liked arriving early, walking the terminal at her own pace, grabbing a coffee, reviewing her weather briefing one more time before heading to operations. The terminal was in that particular early morning state, half awake, fluorescent lights humming, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from a kiosk near the security checkpoint. Gate agents were just opening their podiums. A cleaning crew was finishing its overnight run. The day was just exhaling into motion. Denise had already completed her digital weather briefing at home. She had reviewed the NOTAMs, the official notices to air missions that pilots check before every flight. She had her flight bag packed and ready. Her uniform was pressed. Her 4-stripe epaulets were properly attached. Her Trans-American Airways employee photo ID was clipped to her lapel. Her FAA-issued airman certificate was in her jacket pocket, as it always was. Her crew credential, which gave her access to the entire airport, including the jet bridge and the aircraft, was on a lanyard around her neck, clearly visible to anyone who looked at her for more than 1 second. She walked through the terminal the way she always did, with purpose, but without hurry. She passed the coffee kiosk and decided she had time. She ordered a medium black coffee, exchanged a warm good morning with the woman behind the counter, and continued toward the C concourse. Gate C14 was about 3 minutes away. She could already hear the ambient sounds of the terminal picking up as more travelers began arriving for early flights. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. This was just another Tuesday. Then a hand came up in front of her. Officer Kowalski stepped into her path in the corridor between gates C9 and C11. He did not say, "Excuse me." He did not say good morning. He raised his right hand like a stop sign and said plainly, without a trace of courtesy, "Ma'am, hold on. Where do you think you're going dressed like that?" Denise stopped. She looked at him. In a fraction of a second, she processed everything. His posture, his tone, the way his eyes moved across her uniform with skepticism rather than recognition. She had been in this moment before. Not in this airport, not with this man, but in this specific, suffocating moment that too many black professionals carry inside them like a second heartbeat. The moment when everything you've earned, everything you've built, everything you are gets reduced to a question that starts with "ma'am" and ends with doubt. She did not sigh. She did not roll her eyes. She did not let her voice carry even a single degree of heat. "I'm going to my aircraft," she said. "I'm the captain on flight TA447 departing gate C14 at 7:45. I have passengers boarding in under an hour." Kowalski looked at her, then he looked at her uniform, then he looked at the 4 gold stripes on her shoulders, then he looked back at her face. He did not move out of her way. "Can I see some ID?" Denise reached into her jacket pocket and produced her FAA Airman Certificate, a federally issued document with her name, certificate number, and ratings printed clearly on it, and her Trans-American Airways employee photo ID with her name and the word "Captain" printed beneath her photograph. She held both out to him without a word. Kowalski took them. He looked at them for a long moment, longer than was necessary, longer than any reasonable reading of those documents should have taken. Then he looked up. "These don't look right to me," he said. Captain Denise Hargrove looked at the man holding her valid federal aviation credentials and said calmly and precisely, "Both documents are valid and current. My FAA certificate number is registered in the FAA Airman Inquiry Database. My employee ID is verifiable with one phone call to Trans-American Airways Operations. I'd recommend you make that call now because my departure window is not flexible." Kowalski handed the IDs back. He did not step aside. "I'm going to need you to come with me." He pointed toward a side corridor near gate C11, away from the main flow of the terminal, away from the gate agents, away from the passengers. Denise looked at where he was pointing. She looked back at him. "Officer," she said, "I want to cooperate with you fully, but I need you to state the specific reason you're detaining me, and I need you to contact my airline's operations center immediately. My co-pilot and my crew are already at the aircraft. If I am not at that gate in the next 40 minutes, this flight does not depart on time." "I'm not going to ask you again," Kowalski said. "You haven't asked me once," she replied. "You've only issued demands without cause. But I'll come with you." and I want everything that happens in the next few minutes on record. She walked with him to the side corridor. She did not resist. She did not argue further in the open. She understood, the way professionals who have navigated hostile environments understand, that the corridor of an airport was not where she would win this. Composure would win this. Documentation would win this. The truth would win this. She just had to stay steady long enough to let it. Quick question for everyone watching. Have you ever been in a professional setting where someone looked right past your credentials and questioned whether you belonged? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear from you. In the side corridor, Kowalski radioed dispatch. What he said into that radio became one of the most damaging pieces of evidence in the entire case. He told dispatch he had detained, and he used that word detained, an individual in the C concourse who was, in his words, claiming to be an airline captain and possibly impersonating airline personnel. Those words, possibly impersonating airline personnel, would be pulled from the radio log, typed into an official report, replayed in an internal affairs hearing, read aloud by a union representative, and quoted in 3 separate news articles. They were the words of a man who had already made a decision and was now building a story around it. Denise heard the word impersonating crackle through the radio. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them. Her voice remained level. Officer Kowalski, I need you to understand something. I am not impersonating anyone. I am Captain Denise Hargrove, employee number TA04471, 22-year commercial aviation professional and the legally designated pilot in command of Trans-American Flight TA447. You currently have me detained in a corridor while my passengers are boarding. If this flight delays because of this stop, there will be a formal record of exactly why. Kowalski crossed his arms. We'll get this sorted out. Just stay here. A second officer arrived, Officer Tamara Reyes, and Denise noticed immediately that Reyes looked uncomfortable. Reyes looked at the 4 gold stripes. She looked at the crew credential. She looked at her colleague. Something in her expression shifted. She stepped slightly to the side and spoke quietly to Kowalski. The body camera, his body camera, captured the audio. Reyes said, almost in a whisper, Brad, she's got 4 stripes. That's a captain's uniform. Kowalski said, just as quietly, let's just verify it. Reyes said, then call ops, right now. There was a pause. Kowalski did not call ops. Not yet. While Kowalski stalled, 3 things were happening simultaneously that he was completely unaware of. First, Denise's first officer, a 31-year-old pilot named James Cartwright, had arrived at the aircraft and was waiting for his captain. After 7 minutes with no sign of her, he called her cell phone. No answer. He called the operations desk and asked if Captain Hargrove had checked in. Operations said she had badged through the terminal entrance over 30 minutes ago. Cartwright immediately alerted the gate agent. Second, a passenger at gate C13, a woman named Patricia Odom, who was traveling to Chicago for a job interview, had been watching the entire scene unfold through the glass partition that separated the side corridor from the main terminal. She had her phone out. She was recording. Her camera captured Denise standing in the corridor in full uniform, 2 officers in front of her, her crew credential clearly visible, her posture straight and dignified, her expression impossible to read. Patricia Odom would later say in an interview that she started recording because something about what she was seeing felt deeply wrong. She said, that woman was standing there like a queen while they talked to her like she was a suspect. I needed people to see that. Third, the gate agent at C14, a 26-year-old named Darius Monroe, had picked up the phone and called Trans-American Airways ground operations manager on duty. That manager's name was Sandra Chen. Sandra Chen had been with the airline for 19 years. She knew Captain Hargrove personally. When Darius explained that the captain had not arrived and might have been stopped by airport police, Sandra Chen did not pause, did not ask for clarification, and did not take a breath. She picked up her radio and said 4 words that set everything in motion. Find her, right now. At the 19-minute mark of the detention, Sandra Chen appeared in the side corridor. She was moving fast. Behind her was a Trans-American Airways station manager. Behind him was a second gate agent. Sandra Chen walked directly to Officer Kowalski, produced her own airport operations credential, and said in a voice that was controlled but carried the kind of weight that comes from 19 years of not being played with, "This is Captain Denise Hargrove. She is the pilot in command of Flight TA447. She is one of our most senior captains. Her credentials are valid. Her identity is verified. You need to release her right now." Kowalski looked at Sandra Chen. He looked at the station manager. He looked back at Denise. And in the body camera footage, you can see something shift behind his eyes. Not remorse, not embarrassment. Something closer to the slow, cold realization that he had miscalculated, that the story he had been building in his head for the last 19 minutes had just been taken apart, piece by piece, in a side corridor of an airport he thought he controlled. He stepped aside. Denise Hargrove straightened her jacket, picked up her flight bag, and walked out of that corridor without a single additional word to Officer Kowalski. She walked with Sandra Chen directly to gate C-14. The gate agent Darius Monroe held the door. She walked down the jet bridge. She stepped onto her aircraft. The entire detention had lasted 31 minutes. Flight TA-447 pushed back from gate C-14 exactly 29 minutes late. The official delay code entered into the airline system that morning read, Operational Hold, Crew Access Delay, but the real reason was in 3 security cameras, 1 body camera, and 1 passenger's phone. Inside the cockpit, First Officer James Cartwright looked at his captain as she settled into the left seat. He didn't ask what happened. He could see it in the set of her jaw. He simply said, "We good, Captain?" And Denise Hargrove looked at her instruments, placed her hands on the controls, and said, "We're good. Let's get these people to Chicago." She flew that aircraft to O'Hare with 0 incidents. She landed it perfectly. She stood at the cockpit door as passengers deplaned and said good morning to every single one of them. A few passengers who had heard the word spreading through the cabin during the flight that their captain had been detained in the terminal stopped to say something to her. One elderly man shook her hand and held it for a long moment. One young woman, maybe 22 years old, looked at her and said, "Thank you," in a voice so quiet it was almost just air. Denise nodded. She understood. Then she sat back down in that left seat, pulled out her phone, and began writing. Now, most people who experience what Denise experienced might go home, call a friend, maybe post something frustrated on social media, and let the anger quietly dissolve over time. That's what most people do, because the system is designed to exhaust you into silence. But Captain Denise Hargrove was not most people. And she did not write an angry social media post. What she wrote that afternoon, sitting in the cockpit of a grounded aircraft at Chicago O'Hare, was a formal complaint. And it was extraordinary. The document was 14 pages long. 14 pages, single-spaced, structured like a legal brief. It included a precise timeline of the detention with timestamps pulled from her own phone logs, the airport's badge entry records, and the gate departure logs. It included a detailed account of every statement made by Officer Kowalski, word for word, as best as she could reproduce them, along with her responses. It included a section identifying the specific airport authority policies she believed had been violated during the stop. It included a section on FAA regulations pertaining to the non-interference of airline crew during pre-departure procedures. It included the names of every witness she was aware of: Sandra Chen, Darius Monroe, Officer Reyes, First Officer Cartwright, and the specific information each of them could corroborate. And it included a formal request for the preservation and immediate review of all video footage, airport security cameras, gate cameras, and Officer Kowalski's body camera, before any of it could be overwritten or archived. She sent it to 5 places simultaneously: the Meridian Airport Police Department Internal Affairs Division, the airport's Civilian Oversight Board, Trans-American Airways Corporate Legal Department, the FAA Regional Office for the Southeast Region, and the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Complaint Division. Sandra Chen, who received a copy that same afternoon, later told investigators she read it twice and then called her own supervisor and said, "We have a problem, and it starts with us too." The Meridian Airport Police Department received Captain Hargrove's complaint on a Thursday. By the following Monday, 4 business days later, Officer Brad Kowalski had been placed on administrative leave pending a formal internal affairs investigation. This was not normal. These processes typically take weeks just to assign an investigator. The speed at which the department moved was a direct reflection of the quality of Denise's filing. There was nothing ambiguous in it. There was nothing emotional or exaggerated. It was precise, documented, and unanswerable. The internal affairs investigator assigned to the case was a veteran officer named Lieutenant Carmen Vasquez. She had 23 years of experience and a reputation inside the department for not flinching. She pulled every piece of footage on the morning the complaint landed on her desk. She watched the main corridor security camera first. She watched it once. Then she watched it again. Then she called in a second investigator and watched it with him. Then she watched the body camera footage. Then she watched the passenger footage from Patricia Odom's phone, which by that point had already been shared online and had accumulated over 2 million views in 72 hours. Lieutenant Vasquez later noted in her investigative summary that the body camera footage alone confirmed every single claim in Captain Hargrove's complaint. Every one. The footage showed that the crew credential was clearly visible from the moment of first contact. The footage showed that valid ID was produced and examined. The footage showed that the word impersonating was used in the radio call without any factual basis. And the footage showed the moment Officer Reyes told Kowalski quietly that the uniform indicated a captain and that he should call operations, and Kowalski's decision not to do so for another 12 minutes. But there was something else in the footage that Lieutenant Vasquez flagged as particularly significant. In reviewing Kowalski's body camera archive going back 6 months, she found 2 prior incidents. 2 other times where Kowalski had stopped individuals in crew uniforms in the C corridor for identity verification. Both times the crew members were black. Both times the stops lasted more than 10 minutes. Both times the crew members' credentials were valid. Neither stop was ever documented in an official report. Neither individual had filed a formal complaint, but the footage was there, preserved automatically by the department's archive system, and now Lieutenant Vasquez had it. This was not an isolated incident. This was a pattern. Do you think the department moved fast enough once they had the evidence? Let me know in the comments below. The investigation took 23 days in total. That is extraordinarily fast for a formal internal affairs review of a sworn officer. In most departments, these reviews take months. But the evidence in this case was so thoroughly documented by Captain Hargrove's complaint, so clearly supported by multiple video sources, and so unambiguously damaging that the investigation essentially confirmed what was already on paper. The department's official findings, released in a formal statement at the end of those 23 days, were devastating. The report found that Officer Kowalski had initiated a stop of a credentialed airline crew member without reasonable articulable cause. It found that his characterization of the stop in his radio call as a possible impersonation was unsupported by any observable evidence and was inconsistent with the training materials governing crew interaction at commercial airport facilities. It found that his delay in contacting airline operations, despite being advised to do so by a fellow officer, extended the detention beyond any justifiable period. And it found that review of prior body camera footage revealed a pattern of conduct consistent with racially discriminatory enforcement practices. The department recommended termination. Officer Brad Kowalski resigned before the formal termination could be processed. His 7-year career at Meridian Airport Police ended because of a 31-minute encounter with a woman he had underestimated in every possible way. Now let's talk about what happened when the footage hit the public, because this is where the story gets bigger than one airport and one officer. Patricia Odom's video had already been circulating before the investigation concluded, but when the official body camera footage was released as part of the public records request filed jointly by 3 news organizations, the internet did what the internet does with certain stories. It refused to let it go. Within 48 hours of the body camera release, the footage had been viewed over 47 million times across platforms. News outlets from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia picked it up. Aviation industry publications ran detailed analyses of the stop from a regulatory standpoint. Pilots, black pilots, white pilots, male and female pilots, posted their own responses online. Several of them were in tears. Aviation professors and civil rights law professors used the footage in their courses. A constitutional law class at Howard University spent an entire session analyzing the legal framework around the stop. The Sisters of the Skies nonprofit, where Denise mentored young women, received over 11,000 new applications in the 2 weeks following the video's viral spread. Young girls who saw a black woman in a captain's uniform stand with unshakable dignity in a side corridor and decided they wanted to be exactly that. The public reaction was not uniform. Some people praised Denise for her composure and her decision to document everything. Others criticized her for not being more forceful in the moment, for cooperating with a stop they viewed as illegal on its face. Some said her calm approach was a survival strategy, forced on her by circumstances that should never have existed. Others said her calm approach was the very thing that made the footage so powerful, that it stripped away every excuse, every rationalization, every argument that the officer could have made, because there was nothing he could point to. Nothing she had done, nothing she had said, nothing except 4 gold stripes and a face he had decided didn't match them. But here is what nobody disputed on any side of any argument. Captain Denise Hargrove was right about everything, from the first second to the last. In the weeks following the investigation, the Meridian Airport Police Department made several significant changes. All airport police personnel were required to complete a mandatory 8-hour recertification course on aviation industry credentials and the legal framework governing crew interaction at at commercial airport facilities. A new body camera review protocol was implemented requiring supervisors to audit footage from high-contact officers on a quarterly basis, rather than only in response to complaints. A direct communication line between the airport police dispatch and airline operations centers was established so that crew identity verification could be completed in under 90 seconds when needed. A civilian review board was given expanded authority to access and review body camera footage without requiring a formal complaint as a trigger. Essentially, the Meridian Airport Police Department made its officers take the kind of training that Captain Hargrove could have taught. Trans-American Airways also did not escape accountability in this story. Sandra Chen's comment that the problem started with them too proved to have real substance behind it. The airline's internal review found that in the previous 18 months, there had been 4 informal reports from black crew members describing uncomfortable or inappropriate interactions with airport security at various hubs around the country. None of those reports had been escalated. None had generated a formal response. The airline instituted a new reporting protocol specifically for crew security interaction incidents, assigned a dedicated point of contact in the legal department for those reports, and released a public statement that was widely described as one of the more substantive corporate accountability statements seen in the industry in years, not because it was long, but because it admitted specific failures rather than offering vague expressions of commitment to values. Here's a question for everyone watching. If you were Captain Hargrove in that corridor, with your credentials visible, your flight boarding, your career established beyond any reasonable doubt, and an officer told you to come with him, what would you have done? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. Now let's talk about the bigger picture, because this story is not just about one airport and one officer. It is about something much larger, and it deserves to be named directly. This story is about the gap between credential and perception, the distance between what a person has earned and what a stranger is willing to see when they look at them. Denise Hargrove had done everything right. By every metric, in every category, she had exceeded the requirements of her profession. She had the license, the hours, the uniform, the seniority, the record, and none of it, not a single piece of it, was enough to prevent a man with less qualification, less education, and less experience in her specific field from deciding in a single glance that she didn't belong. That gap between what you've earned and what some people are willing to acknowledge is not a pilot problem. It is not an airport problem. It is a human problem that shows up in hospitals, in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in classrooms, and in corridors everywhere, every day. This story is also about the compounded weight of composure that black professionals in particular are often required to carry. Denise Hargrove did not raise her voice once during those 31 minutes. She did not cry, she did not beg, she did not perform distress for sympathy. She stood straight and spoke precisely and let the truth sit in the room like something unmovable. And while that composure served her in this situation, while it made the footage undeniable and the complaint airtight, it also represents an extraordinary tax that should never have been levied in the first place. The discipline it takes to be that measured, that precise, that controlled in a moment that is fundamentally unjust is not a skill people are born with. It is a skill that certain communities are forced to develop because the alternative, showing the full human reaction to an unjust situation, is routinely used against them.